So am I on?
Um, Hang on. Just smile here. Let's see. You should be pretty soon. I'm looking. It's hard to say. Well, if you're out there watching, let us know. There, there you go, Janice. You're on. Janice, you're on.
Good evening, and I am speaking because my internet connection is unstable.
Janice, you're on. So just start talking. It's okay.
Okay, good evening, and welcome to North by Northwest Presents. Tonight we're going to work on part 3 of my first tag. What else do I need to know? If we haven't met before, I wanted to let you know that I'm a member of Pride of Portland Chorus and part of the faculty for Region 13 and Harmony College Northwest. I'm also the coordinator for Region 13 Arrangers Workshop and the coordinator for the annual tag writing contest. Part 3 of my first tag is what else do I need to know? In our previous my first tag presentation, we chose a melody and word, and we found a key signature and a time signature for that melody and word. Tonight, we're going to find the chords for the key signature. Last time we found that the key signature and time signature were G major and 3/4 time. And those are for the melody, Where Are You Tonight? So our task tonight, whoops. So let's talk a little bit about what we're doing tonight, finding the chords for the key signature. We know that my first tag is for barbershop. We know that barbershop is 4-part a cappella harmony. Harmony is the art of combining simultaneous pitches. Combining simultaneous pitches creates chords. Chords are created by harmonizing a scale. We learned last time that the scale for the melody of my first tag is G major. So we'll begin this evening with a review of the G major scale, and then we'll combine pitches of that scale to be simultaneously sounded to harmonize the G major scale and find the chords for the key signature. So there's the G major scale that we found last time, that's the basis of our melody. And I wanted to review some terminology associated with all major scales. First of all, the alphabet name. We learned how to find the correct alphabet name for each of the notes of our tag and the notes of the scale. And they're listed there, the alphabet names. Now, those are specifically for the key of G. The other things that we're going to talk about are general terms that apply to all major scales. So the scale degree, the first note of a chord, the first alphabet letter of, of a scale in Arabic numbers is 1 and then consecutively through to 7. So the scale degree is referred to in Arabic numerals as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. And you would say it like scale degree 1 of the G major scale. And we know that that's G. The solfege name, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, is listed there also. Now, in this case, we're assuming that it's a movable do. There is a stable dose scale too, but in America, we only use the movable dose scale. So whatever scale we use, the first scale degree is named Do. And in this case, G is Do. The Roman numerals that are assigned to the chords that are created when the scale is harmonized are the next line. And the first Roman numeral, capital Roman numeral there of 1 is assigned to the first chord that's created when the scale is harmonized. Thereafter, we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then back to 1. You'll notice that some of those Roman numerals are capitalized, and the ones that are capitalized are chords that are major in their construction. That is, they're not minor chords, they're major chords. The lowercase Roman numerals are for the minor chords within the structure of the harmonized scale. And the chord that's built on the 7th tone of the scale, this one right here, has a little O up there, superscript, and that indicates a diminished chord. So whenever you see that little O next to a Roman numeral, you'll know that that means diminished chord. The 3 predominant chords of barbershop harmony are built on the tonic, dominant, and subtonic of a major scale. And those are the function names. So we know the first chord is called tonic, and then the rest of them are names are based on that tonic terminology. The only one that we'll really pay much attention to, the only 2, the subtonic, which is on the 7th tone, is sometimes called the leading tone or the leading dominant, because it's the tone that comes directly before the next tonic chord, and you can see that there. The other chord we're really interested in is the 5 chord, or the dominant chord, and that dominant chord is key to some of the sound of barbershop. So a few chord facts. A chord results when 3 or more different pitches of a scale are sounded simultaneously. In barbershop, we utilize primarily triads or chords with 3 pitches, sometimes referred to as 3-note chords. 7ths or chords with 4 pitches, those are 4-note chords, also known as tetrads. And 9th chords, or chords with 5 pitches, or which are 5-note chords, also known as pentads. The terminology that you will hear used most frequently to refer to these 3 types of chords are triads, 7th, and 9th. And that's the kind of chords we'll be building when we begin harmonizing the scale in just a moment. Chords can be consonant or dissonant, and you've probably heard this terminology. Consonant chords means that they are stable and seem to feel at rest. Dissonant chords are unstable and seem to feel restless or wanting to move on. And then chords are named by their root note or fundamental tone. So how do we harmonize the G major scale? Well, the first or tonic chord to harmonize the G major scale is created by choosing every other note of the scale beginning with scale degree 1. And that will create a 3-note cluster, which is then stacked vertically on the staff to create the G major triad. And so there you can see how we're doing that. We take the G, the B, and the D, and then we move them over here and we'll stack them vertically, G, B, D, to form the G major triad. You'll notice that I've also listed the Arabic numerals to indicate which scale degree they are of the scale. And they are the 1, the 3, and the 5. And you can see that here, the 1, the 3, and the 5. Every other degree of the scale forms the major triad. And when we begin that process on the first note of the scale, we call that the tonic triad. In this case, for our G major scale, the G major triad. The tonic triad is assigned the Roman numeral of 1. So you'll often hear it referred to as the 1 chord, in this case for the G major scale. The next 3-note chord for harmonizing the G major scale begins with A, because it is scale degree 2. And then we move on through the scale, forming a chord with every other note until we have created a chord for all 7 of the G major scale degrees. And here's what they all look like. This is the G major triad that we just finished building. If we were to follow the same procedure for the next scale degree 2, then we have the A minor triad. And the third one is B, and so forth, through the F sharp, which is the F sharp diminished. Above those chords, I placed the standard chord symbols that you'll see on music, especially if you're looking at sheet music, you'll see those. And the standard chord symbol for each of the chords is just there: G, A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor, and F sharp diminished. If there's no qualifier after the capital letter, then you can assume it's a major chord. So that's why there is nothing after the G or the C or the D in the G major scale, because they are all major chords. You'll notice down below I've listed the tonic and the dominant and the leading tone for the chords of the G major scale. One more thing that I want to mention, because we name chords by their root. So when the first note in the chord that we build is a G, we name it as a G chord. When it's an A, we name it as an A chord. And while the scale degree that we use to create the A chord in the G major scale is not 1, we consider the root note, the note that we name it by, as a 1 note in the chord. So all of these chords are 1, 3, and 5, 1, 3, and 5, 1, 3, and 5, etc. And if you were to go to the A scale and the B scale and the C scale and so forth, you would see how that would work out. But for our purposes, we're just going to remember that we always name the chord by the root, and that's always the 1, 3, 5 when we're talking about a triad. So let's move on to the 4-note chords. They're commonly referred to as the 7th chord. 4-note chords that harmonize the G major scale are created by choosing every other scale note to combine into a 4-note cluster, which is then stacked vertically on the staff to create the 7th chord. They're called 7th chords because they are formed by adding the 7th pitch of a scale, or the 7th scale degree, to the top of a triad. And so there you can see the notes that are being, the pitches that are being combined, the G, the B, the D, and then now we're going to add the 7th, the F sharp, to the top of that stack. And so we have a 1, 3, 5, 7 chord. The next 4-note chord for G major begins with A, and so on until we go through all of the scale degrees. And there is what all of those chords look like. Now, when we created 7th chord in the G major scale, that first chord, we don't refer to that as the tonic chord anymore. We refer to that as G major 7. The next chord, again, is a minor chord. The 3rd chord is another minor chord. Then the 4th chord is a major chord. The 5th chord is one of the chords that we really like. It's called the dominant seventh chord or the 5/7 chord because it's built on the fifth tone, the fifth scale degree of a major scale, and it has 4 notes stacked vertically. You'll notice that, whoops, the name on for the seventh scale tone, seventh chord, a lot of sevens, the seventh scale tone, seventh chord. It has different names depending on the school of thought. I prefer to call it the F sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord, and that's what popular music does and jazz music does, which is very closely related to what we work with. It's also sometimes called the half diminished chord. And so if you notice that terminology, why you'll know that it applies to the 5/7, excuse me, to the 7/7 chord. Lots of numbers to keep straight. The ninth chords that harmonize the G major scale contain 5 notes. They are created by adding the ninth tone of the scale to the top of their respective chord stacks. For example, if we were to look at the dominant 7th chord that we just created, the D7 chord, it's D, F sharp, A, and C. If we wanted to make that into a 9th chord, we would add 1 more note to the space above, and that note is E. So the dominant 9th chord is D, F sharp, A, C, and E. We could also do that for a major 7th chord. And for G major 7th chord, we have G, B, D, and F sharp, if you recall, when we created that chord. If we want to have a 9th chord known as G major 9th, we add 1 more note to the top of the stack, and that note is A. So G, B, D, F sharp, A is the major 9th chord. So we can summarize then that when we harmonize the G major scale to create chords, we have triads and 7ths and 9ths. And there they are summarized and listed for you with the chord names and the chord spelling. In this particular graphic, I just added the 9th chord, the 9th tone in parentheses. There. To the 7th chord. So which of these chords do we use in women's barbershop? Well, we use all except that 3-note diminished chord in the Sweet Adeline's International Barbershop Chord Vocabulary. So all of these chords except that one are part of the barbershop vocabulary. And here's the summarization of the barbershop vocabulary. You've probably heard that there are 11 types of chords in the barbershop vocabulary, and we have covered a lot of them so far. We've covered the major triad, which is a 3-note chord, the dominant 7th, which is a 4-note chord, the dominant 9th, which is a 5-note chord. Then we've also found minor triads, minor 7th, major 7th, and major 9th. There are a couple of chords in this auxiliary group that we haven't yet looked at, the minor 6th and the major 6th. So we'll look at those in just a moment. And then there are the 2 chords in the chromatically altered category, diminished 7th and augmented chords. The diminished 7th is a 4-note chord. The augmented is a 3-note chord. And those chords we'll also be looking at in just a moment. The predominant chords that we use are these 3 here, and that's why they're emboldened. But we couldn't get along without the rest of them. It's just that they're not used predominantly. So major and minor sixth and augmented triad. The major and minor sixth chords can be formed simply by adding the sixth tone to the top of the chord stacks of the respective major and minor triads. So in the key of G, we have the chords of G6, A minor 6, C6, and D6. And they're shown there for you. And you notice they have kind of an unusual shape to the chord stack. And that's because the top two notes are right next to each other on the keyboard. The augmented major triad can be created by simply raising the top note of a major chord by 1/2 step. And so for the G chord, while the G major chord is G, B, D, the G augmented chord is G, B, D sharp because it's raised by 1/2 step. And that's how you create an augmented chord. And you will see these chords used, but in barbershop arrangements, but infrequently. They're not a major part of the structure of a barbershop arrangement. Diminished seventh chords are another chromatically altered chord, similar to the augmented chord in that way. A chromatically altered chord has one or more accidentals in its structure in the key in which it is used. So when you look at a piece of music that's in, say, G major, and you notice a chord that has a sharp or a flat next to it, it's one of its notes, then you know that it's not part of G major scale. It comes from somewhere else, and so you have to chromatically alter the note in the scale of G major. Because of the unique structure of the diminished seventh chord, there are only 3 of them, and they're on the next slide for you. So if we were to build these on some of the scale degrees of the key of G and just stack them up in nice neat thirds, we would find that there's a B diminished chord, there's an E diminished chord, and there's an F sharp diminished chord. And the B diminished chord is listed there for you, D, D, F, and A flat. And you notice that in the key of G, which is what our treble clef shows us we're in, we have to add accidentals in order to spell the chords the way they need to be played or sung. And so that's a good giveaway that it's a chromatically altered chord and is not a part of the harmonized scale of G major. And the same is true of the E diminished chord and the F sharp diminished chord. In common usage, any note in a diminished seventh chord can serve as a root for purposes of naming the chord or for building the chord for that matter. But we've just used the 3 that are give us a nice symmetrical chord stack there. So now we've covered all of the types of chords that are part of barbershop, and there are 11 of them. The 3 predominant chords, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of chords that we'll call auxiliary, and then we have the 2 chromatically altered chords. So that's the chord vocabulary for barbershop from the Sweet Adeline International. And here they are laid out in on the staff, so you can see exactly what notes belong to which chord. If you've chosen a public domain song that's not in the key of G, then you can harmonize the scale for other major keys. And I've listed there for you the chart of harmonized scales for other keys through what 4 flats and 4 sharps. That means the key signatures contain 4 flats and 4 sharps. And that's how you'll hear that referred to when you hear someone talk about scales through 4 sharps and 4 flats. This is what they're talking about. So we have there on the flat side, we have the F major scale, which is 1 flat. Then we have the G major scale, which is 1 sharp. Then we have a B flat major scale, which is 2 flats, and the D major scale, that is 2 sharps, and the E flat major scale, that's 3 flats, the A major scale, which is 3 sharps, the A flat major scale, which is 4 flats, and the E major scale, which is 4 sharps. Now, if you happen to have a public domain song that doesn't fit into any of these keys, you can look up the different keys on the internet and find as many sharps and flats as you need. But most of the music that we use in popular music will fit into one of these key signatures. So next time, for part 4, we'll be using the barbershop chord vocabulary for the D major scale that we found today. We'll choose one of those chords for each melody note of my first tag. So I look forward to seeing you next time, when we'll figure out which chords to use for my melody, and we will choose one of those chords for each melody note in the my first tag. Thanks for being with me this evening. I look forward to seeing you next time.